feel like with the people pleasing and the trauma and how I react to those things just make a perfect storm for people to use and abuse and take advantage of you. So it's been a hard lesson to learn, all to get that affection, to feel like you matter to someone.
Welcome to That's Me, a podcast about autistic lives unfiltered. I'm your host, Corey Andreas, a late diagnosed ADHD therapist, advocate, writer, and speaker, and someone on a mission to change the way the world sees autism, one real story at a time. You know that moment when someone describes your exact experience and something in you goes, wait, that's me. That's where this podcast begins. You're here for a reason. Maybe your neurodivergence went unnoticed your whole life. Maybe every therapist you ever saw told you it was just anxiety. Maybe what you thought was depression was actually autistic burnout and nobody had the language for it. I've watched it happen in my own office and at my unmasking retreats. That moment when everything suddenly makes sense. This is neurodivergence. The world thinks it knows what autism looks like, and that picture often leaves us completely out. For those of us who mask so well, we were missed even by the professionals. So skip the textbooks, the outdated DSM, and the stereotypes. This is where you hear it from the people living it. And the professionals we bring in, they're evolving with us, not holding on to outdated ideas that left us behind. Here you'll find real stories from real people. We'll explore the full neurodivergent experience, the confusion, the overwhelm, the cost of being missed and misunderstood, and the joy that comes with finally finding people who see you. I'm so glad you're here. Hello, we are here with Stephanie for the That's Me podcast, and all I can think about is Stephanie's awesome hair color and that blanket. Before we go any further, please let us know about the blanket. We must know.
Not sponsored, but company called Lola Blankets. I used my 50% off coupon code from the retreat to get this.
Lola Blanket.
Yes. I've actually started like treating it like a sleep sack, where I'm like, I create a taco shape in bed and then I put myself in the middle of it and I'm just like burrowed in this like just fur fantasy. And it's just such like a stim late at night. Like I think I'm sleeping deeper because it's just surrounded by softness.
I'm reaching this point where softness has become like the just most important factor in all things.
Yeah.
I need a shirt. How soft is it? I need to sit in a chair, which blanket, which hoodie. That's all I think about.
The need for softness is a little frustrating though, because I'm like going through my closet, a good 75% of it. Like there's a type of t-shirt, like the novelty kind or like from like some location. It's just like stiff as if it was made out of denim. And I'm thinking, I'm going to just have to get rid of every single one of these, even if they have sentimental value, because like I am never going to put this on my skin.
I think the last year I have just finally decided that I don't want quantity. I don't need a ton of variety of certain things. I want everything that I have to be so magically soft that that's the only thing that matters. I've decided.
Yeah.
That's where I am with things.
Very much so.
Yes. So I get it. Your blanket was speaking to me. The whole idea of this podcast, actually, I have to tell you, you were very influential in me finally getting this off the ground. You and I got a chance to meet a couple months ago before I was doing this big training, and I had this brainstorm in the 11th hour that I was going to ask some people on my mailing list if maybe they would be open to sharing their stories. So I just sent out this mass newsletter and said, would anyone like to share their stories? You came in and I knew nothing. I knew nothing about what we were going to talk about. I had no idea what you wanted to share, what you were all about. And you had people completely stopped in their tracks at my training. I'm still getting emails about your story and just how unbelievable it was. And I thought to myself, after the impact I saw, both the way that it landed with other people, and it seemed like it landed with you. And I thought to myself, we need more of this. We need more of this. So I just loved everything that you were so brave to share. And I just keep thinking, you know what? Maybe if more of us are just out here telling our real people stories, then start to get better. So I'm so glad you're here. So tell me, what was that like for you last time to get out there and know that people were going to be listening to what you had to say?
Well, obviously at the point of recording, you have like no idea how it's going to land. So, in a little way, just talking to you, it's like, oh, she gets it. Okay, cool. Like tiny little validation, just a little glimmer, I'm like, that felt good. It was like therapy without like the therapy speak, like telling me about your mother. Like it wasn't that. Just nice to like, I have very few like out autistic people in my life, zero women. And so just on that level, just talking to another, AFAB about life, it was like, okay, this felt good. I felt seen. Even though I was the one doing most of the talking, I felt seen just by looking at your face.
Yeah.
And then when it actually came for like the recording, I was like listening to like half of the training like on my phone at the dog park, walking around with the dog with the phone like to my ear so I could hear what was happening. So I wasn't really able to see like the chat thread or anything like that. And then when we got to the house, I was scrolling through the chat thread. I'm like, oh my God, there's a lot of people here and they're saying a whole lot of stuff. There was a little bit of overwhelm with that, just knowing that the quantity of people who would be listening. It was like a good kind of overwhelm. It was just like, wow, this is actually resonating with a lot of people. And I think there have been several moments in my life where, I don't know if jealousy is the right word. There's been a lot of moments in my life where I'm just like, if only people knew. Because I think my husband is the closest person on the planet to like knowing even like 50% of the depth and breadth of my story.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of sadness in knowing that no one else really knows who I am. So that part, just even like chipping a little bit of that rock away through that training, I think was really nice. And I know we'll segue back to it, but that spurred ideas in my head for extracurricular activities I would engage in terms of my story.
Yeah. And it was so interesting to me. I interviewed, I want to say 10-ish people, maybe a little less than that, for
Hmm.
the training. And I really had no idea what I was getting into. I put it out on a mailing list that has hundreds of people on it.
Yeah.
And this is not a list that just goes to like clients. This is a list that goes to a ton of people that I don't know at all. And I was like,
Yeah.
what could go wrong, right? And I was just hoping that certain themes would come through. And I just kept thinking, it's a lot of time to stand in front of people who really want to learn for 8 hours, listening to the same person yapping, it just loses effect. I had no idea the impact that this would have. We had over 18,000 people signed up for the training. I'm pretty sure it's grown since then, but the emails that I got for weeks, months afterwards were saying things like, I feel so seen. I heard my story, and you were far and away the person mentioned the most. And they said, I feel so seen in the stories that I heard, but also just, for someone to be so brave to share the things that you shared, it's a lot, it's really a lot to put yourself out there. And I think we've heard enough of the stories of famous people and,
Hmm.
people who took like Steve Jobs. We get it. Like, we know how that story ended, but you really remind me in a lot of ways how important it is, the stories that I wish I could tell people from my caseload. This is the reality of what
Hmm.
neurodivergence looks like right now. So
Yeah.
I would love to be able to let listeners know all about you and what your story was like. Did you have like an aha moment in adulthood when the neurodivergence
Hmm.
piece made sense?
It was a slow bleed, I think. And kind of like a segue in what you were just saying, you just said like how brave I was for doing that training and sharing my story. I'm oblivious to the level of bravery. And I think that I'm just like, if you ask me a question, I'll answer. I'll tell you the
Yeah.
shape and consistency of my bathroom
Yeah.
things, if you just ask. And I've been like that my whole life. And so even as a kid, I don't understand how that's considered such extreme vulnerability because I've just always been vulnerable. I've always been like super curious, asking why a lot, and having adults look at that as like talking back or giving attitude, or calling me sensitive, like, all these things. And it's like, it's so funny as an adult. I'm 44 years old, and I'm like, that's to me, that's not vulnerable. That's just truth.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of that feeds into like my diagnosis story is the fact that I've just always been about truth and finding things out and self-actualization, self-understanding. And so now I can probably look back and say that psychology, sociology, what it means to be human is like a special interest to me.
Yeah.
But I also think it's like a special interest born out of like trauma and trying to like, protect myself. So long story short is like the journey to self-discovery and self-identification, as well as, getting diagnosed by a PhD was like, 33 solid years of like, why am I weird? Why do people think I'm sensitive? What's up with these rules? Sometimes you get in trouble, even if you follow the rule to a T, because there's some exception you didn't know about, and like trying to find ways to fit in. 33 years of like trial by fire, like going through the war. and doing all of that self-reflection, because I learned really young that to blame myself, because like none of my life has been for a lack of self-awareness. I just never had permission to interpret my experience through any lens other than self-blame.
Yeah.
So I was obsessed with, figuring out what is wrong with me, why am I different? Because the fact that my traits were consistently being framed as moral failures, not differences. And so it was hard fought work to get to that point in my 30s.
Do you remember any of the early days of someone taking something and making it into something that you said, or, and making it into some negative trait about you, or interpreting it wrong as a kid?
Yes, definitely. The very first story I have, I was like a toddler. We were like helping out around the house. Me, my sister, and my mom were cleaning up, and they gave me super easy tasks to do. And so I was told to empty my dad's ashtray because he was a smoker. I picked it up, put it in the trash, didn't even think twice about it. And it turned out that there was like a unsmoken cigarette sitting in the ashtray, a fresh one. And I threw it out, and my dad just flipped out. It was so volatile that my mom like grabbed me and my sister to rush us out of the house so we could cool down, but there wasn't time to stop to grab my shoes. And so like I have this sense memory of my bare feet hitting the hot sidewalk and being in pain and not really understanding, what did I do wrong? You
Right.
told me to empty the ashtray. That's what I did. Why is he so upset? There's hundreds of little stories of like that throughout my childhood where I am genuinely trying to be helpful. I want to be good, and somehow I figure out a way to, mess it up. I don't know if we could curse on here,
You
but
sure can.
okay. But, I fuck it up.
Yeah.
And never really understanding why. And, that theme carried all the way through adulthood with like miscommunication issues at work, where, a supervisor says, be, blunt and to the point with your communications with me because I don't have time to read fluff. And then I do that, and then I get in trouble for being curt. And I'm told I need to go to interpersonal communication training because my communication's off. Like all these things where I'm like, I am giving you what you told me you needed. I'm
Yes.
doing the right thing, but I'm still
Doing what
getting
you
in
asked.
trouble.
Yeah,
Yeah.
still in trouble. So interesting hearing other people's stories too. I was just talking to someone the other day about being called like a smart aleck as a kid and being like, you think you're so smart, don't you? And as a kid being like, yeah, I do think I'm smart. I think being smart is one of the best things you can be. And then I would be like, I sense that the way you're saying that is not a good thing because it sounds like it is just gross to you. But remembering as a kid being like, why do you keep like weaponizing someone being smart? And now I look back and I'm like, I can't believe how many times that confused me.
That was a big thing, especially with my dad. He thought I always had so much attitude. Like if I'd get in trouble for doing something, for one, didn't understand why what I did was a problem. So I was seeking that context. And then when I would ask questions like, well, how is what I did wrong? It's like, oh, don't talk back to me. Don't give me lip. Being a smart ass. Then, very young, I was taught that basically compliance was more important than effort. It was more important than understanding. And so, yeah, that did very much frames how I behave, to this day in terms of
Yeah.
like people pleasing as threat management.
Yeah. Keeping yourself safe. Where
Yeah.
did that start in childhood for you? Is that something that you just did to stay safe?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Little girl in me does, takes 3 hours to write an email because she's so afraid of being misinterpreted and ticking someone off. And I track that a direct line carved in my bones to being a little kid, just being so earnest and trying so hard. It's just higher stakes as an adult.
Did you, as a kid, do you remember being praised?
Yes, I was praised for competence while panicking internally. So, like, on one hand, they'd call me a smartass who talked back. On the other hand, it was like a running joke that I was Cliff Clavin from Cheers.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And they'd call me like, an old soul,
Yep.
born middle aged, because, even as a real little kid, I'd have deep conversations where I'd be like, how does that feel? What
Yeah.
about the utopia of society? Like, I really wanted to understand and analyze things. I was very hyper literate, hyper verbal. And so I'd have these deep conversations, and adults would look at me cross eyed, like, who are you? But I would also sometimes make mistakes in that I would see things about people where maybe there was a misalignment in what they said and what their face was doing and what actions they took. And I would just say it out loud, like, I think your problem is this. I've made grown adults cry when I was 10 years old because I discovered the one crack in their armor and I said it out loud, which is, we all know you're not allowed to do that.
I'm still working on that one, Stephanie, if I'm being honest. I think that I struggle with that at home, but yeah,
Yeah.
it is
Yeah.
hard. It's hard when you see these patterns, you see things, and then
Hmm.
the one that comes up in our house all the time is like, when people ask a like a rhetorical question. I'm like, "Oh,
Hmm.
no, you know why that happened. That's because," like, "No, no, 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 no,
Yeah.
no, no, Corey."
I feel bad in hindsight for my mom's friends because I like to follow her everywhere. So I would also often hang out with her coworkers from work, spouting off my, epiphanies and my Cliff Clavin facts. And they were like, who is this kid and why is she following us everywhere?
Yep,
Yeah.
that sounds about right. So what was school like for you when in your early days?
It was really rough. I grew up in LA and did like through like third grade there. And there, my academics were, I was above and beyond all my other classmates. Before I even started kindergarten, I was reading like fourth grade short story anthologies and things like that. So, kindergarten, I probably could have easily skipped the first few years, but there was like, having grown up around those kids, there was a bit of a culture that I kind of slid into, or maybe I'm overestimating how well I fit in, but around 9 years old, we moved to the middle of the country in California, population like 200 people. And so I went from LA listening to Guns N' Roses and pirate radio to being with a bunch of people who listened to nothing but Gene Autry and Garth Brooks and did 4-H and all those fun
Whoa,
things. And
culture
so
shock.
I definitely did not fit in. So I had to learn the new culture while adjusting to this completely new lifestyle where my dad wanted to be a cattle rancher. Talk about transitions, right? And so I was the weird outsider. I'm also Latina, and everyone else there was white. The number of ways I was different, I could just rattle off a list infinitely. But I had to deal with office politics for the first time in the elementary school there. The popular kids were like the school teacher's daughter and the pastor's daughter. And to get in with them, they gave me rules like, you're only allowed to hang out with us during the first recess and lunch, but any other recess or after school, like, we don't know you. Where you're not allowed to hang out with us.
Wow.
I just accepted that. They treated the friendship bracelets that you would make with thread as like currency, and they tasked me with making a bunch for everybody, but then didn't give me any back. It was a passive aggressive minefield. And I know, talking with one of those girls in my 20s, reflecting back on what happened, I'm like, you realize you bullied the hell out of me. And she was completely oblivious, or at least feigned ignorance
Yeah.
to the whole situation. I was also bullied because of my weight, because I think I may have been fat with a belly for like a couple months, and then they moved straight to boobs and hips. I had my period at 11. And so I was this curvy Latina girl from LA surrounded by a bunch of stick thin white people who had never seen curves of a girl that
Yeah.
young. And so they called me watermelon and lumpy and things like that. So there was the passive aggressive office politics, as well as like actual stereotypical bullying in that school. And I think that really solidified maybe the trauma I inferred from my dad with having to be friends, like trying to do everything right to avoid punishment and abandonment or bullying, and like over functioning in ways. I would try on personalities subconsciously, be a jokester, I'd roughhouse, or I'd learn line dancing because that's what all the girls were doing. But I was trying on all these different things, and the moment I got kind of smacked down for it, then I'd switch to something else. And so that was also a period of time where I was known for coming up with big, wild stories about stupid stuff that never happened, like finding a dead body in the neighbor's house when we lived in LA. Like, because I was trying to find anything that would stick, anything to like stop the bullying and to feel like accepted in some way.
Do you remember having a sense of knowing why they were coming for you? Like, did you know at that time?
It was because I was bad and they were good, because I sucked.
I remember as a kid thinking in so many settings, we moved a ton as a kid, and it just never seemed to end. Like it didn't matter what the setting was, where we were living. I would think to myself, I don't know why I seem to find bullies everywhere we go. And this wasn't just elementary school, it happened through college, it happened through adulthood, at work, at jobs. And I still to this day, I find I spend a lot of time going back to that mentally and going, like, what did I do? Like, what was so bad? I was
Yeah.
trying so hard. And I just
Yeah.
wonder if other people had that same experience because it
Hmm.
seems so confusing as a kid.
Yeah, the shades of gray, if you will, definitely changed depending on like the age and whatnot.
Yeah.
But like in high school and junior high, I ended up in a best friend situationship with someone who was a master manipulator who would love bomb me and do subtle bullying. She would manipulate the boys around us. Like she had a bunch of people in her orbit, going through and dating every boy in the orbit, and I was always there to mop it up. So they called me the psychologist in my group because every single boy in the circle had cried on my shoulder at one point in time because of her. The rub is the fact that I had crushes on a lot of them. So there was that dynamic. And then there was this guy that I liked who was in love with her. And so she told him to prove his love for her, he needed to take me out. And so that was a thing.
No.
Adolescence was tough. There was a lot of little things like that. And what complicated the situation with this person who was my best friend is we were also intimate with one another. It started off as let's practice kissing.
Yep.
And next thing we're doing other stuff. And that carried on for several years. So she was kind of like my lover and my friend and my worst enemy at the same time, getting all that stuff kind of like confused in my head. And I think those social dynamics ultimately led to me like dropping out of high school because I just couldn't take it anymore.
It's such a blending of, different things that are hard at that time. Like everything is hard
Hmm.
at that time. But when you think about, people pleasing, and when you think about the way that you show up in relationships, so many teenagers will say, like, I did all the things so that they would like me. And I can't imagine how confusing that had to be to have like a relationship with someone who is actively hurting you at the same time.
Yeah, and I felt like that pattern in one way or another has persisted my whole life. I think I've said on multiple occasions to my husband that every single person I've ever met, every adult who's ever been in my life has disappointed me or hurt me in some way, shape, or form. Because I feel like that with the people pleasing and the trauma and how I react to those things just make a perfect storm for people to use and abuse and take advantage of you. So
Hmm.
it's been a hard lesson to learn, but I think it's not just professional capacity and a school capacity. It's also leads into like sexuality as well,
Yeah.
where you find yourself potentially participating in things that you natively maybe wouldn't do, all to get that affection, to
Yes.
feel like you matter to someone. And so there's been a lot of moments in my life where I probably crossed lines that my body didn't want because I was so thirsty for acceptance and love and belonging and connection.
Yeah, it's an acceptable way to get it over
Yeah.
and over again. I can't
Hmm.
tell you how many people have shared with me in sessions, that they felt like that's what they had to do. They were like, well, I didn't know how to end the date, so that's what I did. Or I didn't know how to see if they really liked me, so I did what I had to do, but that was a small price to pay to know that they would call back and things like that. We often don't talk to teenagers about, what does the end of the date look like? What does it look like when someone actually cares about you and things like
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. Nobody ever sat me down to talk about boundaries and consent. And so I got a little lucky in the fact that, with the people pleasing and being the one girl with boobs in elementary school, my insecurity probably saved me from having sex at a younger age because, there certain articles of clothing absolutely do not come off, certain activities do not happen, but I gave in those activities to the other person, for lack of a better phrase,
Yeah.
because that was just more comfortable than letting them have access to me. It sucks that it was rooted in insecurity, and that is something that followed me well into adulthood. So it's a hard pattern to break.
It absolutely is. And in a lot of ways, you mentioned people pleasing and over functioning. It's
Hmm.
relational over functioning, really.
Yeah.
It's like I'll just keep you super, super happy and I'll do all the hard work.
Hmm.
And then,
Hmm.
hopefully you'll just tolerate me and call me back, right?
Yeah.
It's so much. And I know a lot of adults still walk around with a lot of shame of looking back, going like, why did I do that? And I'm like, well, it actually makes a lot of sense why we did that.
Hmm.
A
Yeah.
lot of
Yeah.
sense. But
And
yeah.
there was a lot of that. My first serious relationship I fell into when I was 17, and I was with him for like maybe 10, 11 years. I assumed there was a certain role I needed to play, like a certain frequency for sex and, like wifely duties and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And so when the cycles of burnout started to happen in my life, the first one was obviously was when I dropped out of high school, but I also had several cycles with him where I would be unable to have sex and I would feel so much shame and guilt about that. where I would reading my journal entries just beg, I wish you could just sleep with someone else to just take that off my plate. And I wanted him to like leave me because I felt like I couldn't initiate that, because it was a codependent relationship, very much so, where every time I would try to leave him, he'd pull me back in with tears. And I don't like upsetting people. And so I stayed in that relationship 10 years too long
Yeah.
because I didn't want to hurt him. And in my journals, I would just pray that he would meet someone else and just let me go.
Right.
There was definitely a lot of shame related to that. And in my second marriage, my current marriage, there's definitely a bit of where I feel guilt that I cannot perform sexually. And it's like I want to be what he needs and what he wants. But I've had so many cycles of burnout that now it's just a full stop.
Yeah.
Not going to happen. My body refuses to participate in any way, shape, or form and will just collapse in a pile of tears if I try to force it.
I'm so amazed at how common that is too. I mean, I think a lot of us, when we get into this cycle of burnout, it's like it's the first time where we feel comfortable saying, like, I just can't. My body just won't let me do anything. So does that feel linked to burnout for you? Or do you think like part of that is like where you are in your life now and boundaries and things like that?
Yes.
Yeah.
All of the above.
Yeah.
Definitely. It's little things at first. Like the cycles of burnout for me always start with like a lack of self care. Showering becomes difficult, brushing my teeth. And that feeds into sexuality, in that I don't want to be gross. I don't want to be smelly. And there's like this added intersectionality of femininity, in that ever since I was a little girl, I always craved being the delicate, pretty girl, because what I had internalized is you only get care if you are feminine, if you reach that certain level. And I've always felt like a linebacker. Uh, like even when I was thin, I haven't always been fat. Like I've just always felt like just awkward and rough and tumble. And so I internalized that I do not deserve of care. And so there's a big part of me that wants more than anything to be small, to be delicate, to be held, to be picked up.
Right.
And wrapped in that femininity is also like standards of scent, taste, texture,
Yes.
all of that. And so when the burnout cycles happen and I lose the ability to care for my body at that level, then it becomes like a logistical thing. I'm ashamed and disgusted, and like I'm not going to let him go near me because heaven forbid he smells body odor or
Right.
something.
Right.
So even if it was there mentally, there's the logistics of, now in order to have sex, I have to deal with the shower. I have to bathe first in order to make that even happen.
All of these steps have to happen. Yeah. The burnout piece, where I think so many people find they can't make themselves do anything. That really is that, providers aren't picking up on this, healthcare
Hmm.
providers aren't, therapists aren't picking up on it. And oftentimes they think it's depression. And so the things that we're recommending to clients, the things that we're recommending to patients to do during times like that, we may
Hmm.
be treating them with all of the wrong things. And so the burnout just keeps going and keeps going. So you can see how that hits every system. It's hitting the
Hmm.
system of like how how you relate to yourself, your own self-esteem, your body, your
Hmm.
health, now your relationship, now your sex
Yeah.
life. Like it hits every single thing.
Yeah. And for me, it definitely hits everything related to my sense of self. Then it starts attacking my relationships. Then it attacks work. It's almost as if I put my professionalism at the top of the list. The thing with the burnout cycles, it's kind of like a conical pendulum, and the circle just keeps getting tighter. So the amount of days or weeks or months that you can go before you crash just starts getting shorter and shorter and shorter.
Yeah.
And I found myself prioritizing, like, if I can just put in 6 hours of work today, I could just make it through, or I'll have to stop midweek and maybe work over the weekend. I was putting that above and beyond myself and relationship, because I had learned that my over functioning, my ability to produce for people, was vastly more important than my health, my body, my family, my partner, anything like that.
Did you find throughout cycles of your life, like have you gone in and out of burnout? Do you find that you go into burnout and you stay in burnout? What does that look like for you?
I think the cycles of it, they started to get shorter and shorter for a period of time. So the last couple of years have been pretty rough, where sometimes you can count the burnout cycle in a week.
Yeah.
But before, like looking back at my life, there were these big swings, like dropping out of high school and then finally getting a therapist, and then being told you're just depressed and anxious, and then being like, well, then commit me, and being on state disability, completely unable to work. And then, I dug myself out of that hole and went to school and all these good things happened in my life. But then, something else happens and you fall into another
Mhm.
big pit. And then I completely forgot the question you asked me.
I'm so glad it's not just me. Yeah, half the time
Where
I
was I
forget this
going with
question that
that?
I asked. No, if you feel like you're coming out of burnout, going in and out.
There's definitely an entrance and an exit. I would say I don't have a very good sense of what's happening in my body. So I would say that the burnout is a collapse, a falling in. And then to exit it, you're like gripping to the side of the cliff and you're
Yes.
pulling yourself out little by little. So the recovery seems to take so much longer than the fall. But in looking back at those patterns of burnout, there was definitely signs that I missed when I was younger. It starts with starting to push things off the list, push myself off the list, push my family, put my relationship off the list to the point where you're kind of like you're at the end of your tank.
Yeah. There was something you shared the last time we talked that
Hmm.
was so fascinating to me. You were sharing, I hope I'm getting the details right, but I think you said you were in high school and you managed to find a way where you wrote a note to the school saying that you were
Yeah.
out.
Yeah.
You had a sick note from your mom, and then you had a note for your mom that school was closed. And tell
Yeah.
our listeners what you did with that week.
Shenanigans.
Yeah. Shindig.
Shenanigans. When I was in high school, I would find creative ways to give myself a timeout, and that was one of the big ones. But there were also like little things I did before that. Like was diagnosed with gallstones when I was just 13 years old, probably stress induced gallstones. And so there were a couple times where I would like fake a gallbladder attack just to stay at home, just to be in bed, or like I'd sneak out of the house, pretend I went to school, and then slip back into the house and like sit in my closet all day daydreaming. And so, daydreaming, man, it's the best and the worst. But there was this one year, it was for winter break. And I was just, I can't keep up with the demands. I was taking a bunch of AP classes, dealing with the drama, my best friend drama, and all the boys who wanted my psychological assistance. The rules of high school are absolutely ridiculous. And so we were given the notice for parents that came in the mail, but I intercepted the mail and I forged that entire, like I retyped the whole letter. I recreated the school's logo pixel by pixel in paint to recreate the letter, and I changed the dates for winter break to give myself an extra week. Gave that to my mom, and then I called the school as my mom saying that I had strep throat because I knew no one would question an entire week's absence with strep throat. And it's not like I did anything crazy. I wasn't like a bad kid. I just hung out at home because obviously I couldn't hang out with my classmates because they were in school.
Yeah.
So, I found myself just wandering around town, walking through the creek, poking things with a stick like I did when I was a kid, window shopping, sitting in fast food restaurants, sipping drinks, just kind of just turning things off in my head. And that was probably about a year before I ended up completely just collapsing and waking up one morning saying I can't go back to school anymore. I just physically can't do it.
It has taken me 45 years to realize that I need to sit in the closet and daydream. It has taken me
Mhm.
45 years to know that I need to take a couple days off to poke things with a stick outside. I mean, I think the world does that to us. It pushes down all of our instincts. And for you at that age, how you figure that all out to get that week to work, but to know enough about yourself to see that through and give yourself
Mhm.
that time to recharge. It's
Mhm.
an unbelievable amount of resilience. But it also strikes me like it had to happen. Like your
Mhm.
needs were so crucial at that moment and no one was noticing what was going on
Mhm.
with you.
I think that the key thing there is I may have seen the need and followed through with the shenanigan, but I don't think there was any like analytics and understanding of the broader world and my needs and how none of that. It was just like pure instinct.
Yeah.
Like I'm good with computers.
Yeah.
I can pull this off.
Like crisis, let's fix it. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. But there was no analysis, no foresight or anything like that. It just happened, like going to the bathroom. It just happened.
Yeah. Now, you've shared before that, your body sort of shut down on you and there's
Hmm.
been some health stuff that's gone on. Do
Hmm.
you do you think that burnout had to do with what ultimately ended up happening with your health?
Without a doubt, a doctor will never tell me otherwise because they don't even understand us. But I think what happened with me is like for Most of my adult life, I didn't know who I was or where I fit in. So I went through lots of different cycles of bouncing back and forth across the country, chasing these crazy opportunities. I think the ADD was kind of like driving the ship
Yeah.
at that point. And then I stumbled into a pattern where I realized, I could hold a job, keep a job, because I can never stay employed for more than like maybe 6 months. I just couldn't do it. But I found that I was really good with databases and data management. So I found myself in this niche as like a Salesforce database engineer, basically give my labor away for free to get a foot in the door. And that parlayed into this other job. And because I'd finally like my academia and my ability to produce when it comes to technology was always the thing that I was praised for. I have this work persona, which is my last name, and everyone just calls me that, and that is the person who is professional. They get stuff done. They have this immense capacity. And what I found I think I only worked full time, at that level of productivity for like good 13 years before parts started falling off the car.
Yeah. Yep.
Basically, I was driving a jalopy one day where I was at work and I was having like some chest pain that I thought was just like panic attack or something. Yep. And so I just carried on with my work, dealing with a very, very frustrating client. And then that's when I noticed that the pain started creeping up my neck. And then it was in my jaw as if I had just had dental work. I'm like, this is so weird. My sense of my body was not like, this is a heart attack. There was no like major like red flags. I was like, okay, I must be having a panic attack. I took a Xanax and I jokingly told my husband I was going to lay down with the dog. And if he heard a loud boom, that was me dropping dead.
Oh my gosh.
It was just a joke.
That's so something I would say.
So I was laying there for a while, curled up with the dog, and I'm like, why is it not subsiding? It should have subsided by now. And that's when I looked at my Apple Watch and looked at my heart rate, and it was like 50 beats a minute, like kind of low. And I was like, well, that's not right. Normally if it's a panic attack or something, the heart rate would be high. Then I told my husband, I'm going to take 2 aspirin just in case. And he's like, if you're thinking of just in case, we're going to the ER right now. He's like, you can either go to the ER right now with me, or you can call your doctor and make an appointment, which is like the worst threat ever because I do not like getting on the phone.
Please don't make me call my doctor.
No, like
Please
I was
anything.
like, absolutely not. I was like, I would rather suffer the indignity of an ER. And so we drove there thinking they're probably just going to send me home. It's nothing. But, after several hours waiting in the ER, they're like, yeah, you're having a heart attack. They called it an end-STEMI heart attack. And that's the kind where the heart itself is functioning, but something is affecting it. And so what I was actually having is called a SCAD, spontaneous coronary artery dissection. And this is hello connective tissue. Mm-hmm. This is when the artery just tears like a hematoma on like an animal's ear or something. It just tears and then it bleeds a bit. And that bleeding of the artery is what causes a temporary blockage. So the heart is fine, no heart disease, no cholesterol problems whatsoever. It's the fact that the artery tore and temporarily blocked blood flow to the heart, causing some damage and pain and all that stuff. So that happened 2 years ago now, 20, I have time. So
what is time?
2 or 3 years ago, but they found there was no underlying cause. A lot of the people who do have this type of heart attack, it predominantly happens to healthy young women, premenopausal, sometimes as young as teenagers. Like it can just happen. And often it's caused by FMD, fibromuscular dysplasia, which is like a tortuosity of your veins and things like that. But I don't have that. So they said, it's stress induced. You just need to reduce and manage the stress in your life to avoid having a heart attack again, which is basically telling me to do the hardest thing on the planet.
Yeah, just manage your stress. .. whatever
as simple
that
as that.
Right.
Yeah.
So how did that change your outlook? I mean, that is such a massive medical event. How did that change your outlook on, what you were doing and how you were spending your time?
It was one of those things where it was both monumental and nothing at the same time, because all the doctors around me kind of treated it like, oh, you got a bruise. I was like, well, what lifestyle changes do I have to make? They're like, well, if you want, you could follow the heart healthy diet and reduce your salt, but you don't have to because you don't have heart disease. Really just manage your stress. And so the doctors didn't really I feel like I didn't get enough context for them. So I had to go into autistic research mode.
Yes.
To really understand it myself.
That was my next question.
They also forced me to stop a lot of the medications that I think were like bridging things together and what made my capacity as big as it was. Like I had to stop my Adderall and my birth control overnight, which was kind of like threw my body for a loop. And then they also put me on beta blockers, which caused an immense amount of brain fog to where I was so tired, like I didn't really want to even like move off the couch,
Yeah.
which caused weight gain. And they're like, oh, well, you need to exercise. I was like, but my brain is not existing on the same plane
Not
of
working.
existence as the rest of my body. Like I felt more autistic than I ever have at any period in my life. Without the Adderall, the ADD was just like this annoying kid bouncing in the background, but I had no energy to do anything. So it was like I was trapped in my own dysfunctional brain.
Yeah.
So I did take a couple months off work and I went back for reduced hours and I tried to like advocate for, maybe put me on one project at a time because I'm having a real hard time juggling multiple worlds in my head because of the brain fog. The burnout that I was dealing with after that point, was despite that advocacy. I was in constant conversations with my supervisors about like working conditions to like keep me going. And
Yeah.
so the burnout that I was dealing with that time wasn't because I wasn't advocating, it's because my advocacy like had no teeth. Like my supervisors could only do so much. And so like even with the so-called like reduction in
Yeah.
demand, I was still trying to perform at the same level because like I'm a perfectionist as well and I have to design the most flexible right size system that will work for the client today and 10 years from now and like my work product never deteriorated in quality, but I had to push through all of that to get to that point. And so like leading up to the layoff, I was at that point having twice weekly conversations with my supervisors, trying to manage the workload, get them to change some of the office politics. And then, we were in active conversations and then I got laid off. And so I couldn't help but feel like, well, this is a result.
Of advocating. I think a lot of people that end up getting laid off after advocating for themselves
Mhm.
are left wondering, like, is that why? Is that what actually happened? Because the reality is, they can say whatever they want, but
Yeah.
people are being
Hmm.
laid off left and right, especially
Hmm.
now, the last couple of years, it's been horrific.
What I took away from that, I'm trying to carry through in my work life, is that capacity does not equal consent. And that, my competence does not guarantee my safety. And that, accommodation without follow through is not care. I need to raise the bar on my clients and my future employers to be like, you need to meet me at this minimum now because I'm juggling this heart condition, which is really a connective tissue disorder, as well as, the fact that I'm entering into perimenopause now. So that's a whole new wrench in the system
So
there.
fun, isn't it? It's so fun,
The bottom line with my employer that laid me off is like they didn't necessarily ignore my needs. They assumed that my performance meant that I didn't have any.
but you kept performing. Yep.
Yeah.
But all they see is, but she's getting it done.
Yeah. The clients are happy she's getting it done. She's building these amazing things, groundbreaking.
Yep, absolutely.
Doesn't matter.
So from there becomes this opportunity for rebuilding and looking at your life and trying to figure out where you want to move forward there. I know one of the things that you said that I just thought was so amazing is that you were going back and rethinking, learning how to play, learning how to enjoy yourself, learning how to find
Hmm.
your interest at that point.
Hmm.
We met last fall. You were a part of the unmasking retreat, and I'm curious about this like rebuilding, what that's looked like for you.
Since like the retreat and the layoff and all that, and like coming to terms with having to go through the burnout recovery process, like I said, putting those like boundaries in terms of what I will accept in my work life, I've also had to try to reframe my personal life. And one of the exercises I did maybe a couple months after I got laid off, this was spurred by Devon's a book, Unmasking Autism, I think. Dr. Devon Price, talking about kind of like building values inventory, trying to like map out what it is what my values are so that way I can start to reframe and rebuild my life based on those, like funneling all of my choices through that lens,
Yeah.
and really understanding what those core values are. Because one of the things with being undiagnosed for so long is I feel like I don't have an identity. I feel like I know myself in reference to the person I am around.
Yeah.
And so I've been doing a lot of work of trying to discover who I actually am, what I enjoy. And I got to say, it's really, really hard because I feel like with the ADD autism, I feel like I need a body double. Like I get joy, more joy out of doing something with someone else who's passionate about it.
Yeah.
And so, and I can't expect my autistic husband to be my be all end all of all the hobbies and all the things. So there are parts of my life that I still haven't even delved back into because it feels harder, nigh impossible to do it on my own without someone feeding that beast.
Yes.
So that's a bit of a hard part. But going back to the values, like choosing dignity and connection and justice and truth, like trying to make all of the decisions I make in terms of, what I'm going to do as a freelancer, because I don't think I'm ever going to work full time ever again, just because of the reality of my situation and coming to terms with that and trying to get past looking at it through the lens of grief. In trying to figure out who I am, I'm trying to indulge in play, trying to experiment with sensory stuff, getting STEM toys and trying to incorporate them into my daily life to see if bringing in stimming is a bit of an off-gassing of stress.
Yeah.
Or maybe helps me regulate more. But I got to tell you, the early stages of that really feel like you're faking it. Like I have to push myself to do it because it might feel silly, and overriding the internalized shame and the smushing of my personality and myself to fit someone else's box. I feel like that's going to be like a lifelong thing to try to dig myself out of.
Yeah, it's hard to push that down for as long as you did and then say, what is your instinct? What do you want to do?
Yeah.
Like, what's interesting?
Like
What's
I
fun for
feel
you?
stupid dancing in the house when
Yeah.
no one is here. Like I feel perceived 24/7 because I like built in the back of my mind this prototype person to perceive and judge me preemptively. And it's really hard to turn that off, and I haven't.
I remember years ago, long before I knew I was autistic, a therapist saying to me, like, but what do you think, gives you joy? Like what makes you feel like you're kind of going in a better direction with your mood? And I was like, "Oh, that's tough. I don't know. Like when is that ever something that happens?" And I remember having this epiphany, like way longer than this shit. Like this is something you should figure out about yourself probably before your 30s and 40s. But it was like, I remember thinking, if I get in my car and I put on the same soundtrack that I've listened to on repeat for the last decade, and if I do that alone, I'm almost not thinking about the cars around me, but like that actually that felt good in a body sense. It felt good in a like, okay, like at the end of that whole soundtrack, I might feel like something might get better today. But I remember thinking like, is that what she means? I didn't even know what the question meant. And I'm like, I do this for a living. I mean, that should probably be obvious to me. But I relate to what you're saying in terms of like the stimming piece. Like a lot of the things that feel really good also feel really bad because there's always people around.
Yeah.
And even if there's not, it still feels like there are people around. So I wonder what it would have been like had I been doing that since childhood. Like if it didn't feel like something you had to hide, would it feel different to just stim by yourself?
Yeah, I definitely wonder those things too.
Yeah.
And there's one thing that I know gave me peace and made me feel joy and feel good in my body, but I am so scared of it now. And it's music. It was one of those things where I used to take care of the chickens growing up, and so I'd go out to the chicken coop, isolated from the world, and I would sing to the birds, and dance around. And music has been one of those things. It's like a part of my soul, and it kind of followed me through. And I had a tragic moment with music when I was in high school where back then, my identity was based on this belief that I would get into the high school show choir. And when that didn't happen, that also precipitated me dropping out of high school because the one goal I had, the one thing that I framed my identity around, didn't happen and wasn't going to happen. And so instead, this place of shame and fear and embarrassment. Also, when you don't sing for 30 years, shit starts to atrophy.
Yeah.
And I also used to play the guitar like every free moment I had. But even at that age in high school, it was something I did in private. I didn't want to. I was too embarrassed to play in front of other people. So now here I am in my 40s, like wanting to buy every musical instrument under the sun because all of them excite me, but also feeling like shame and like, "Oh, God, I really need to go get lessons because no one's ever given me lessons for anything music related before. But I've always just had this ability to pick up an instrument and make noise come out of it that
Yep.
sounded good." So
Yeah.
I know there's a natural inclination there, but it also scares the crap out of me. So I think in terms of my unmasking, that hill is one that I probably need to figure out how to climb because it might be my saving grace for the latter half of my life.
That is amazing. There was a couple month period right around the election where I was real scared about what the regulation was going to look like in the next couple months, and I had a very impulsive like I'm going to go buy a piano, and I
I
was
bought
like,
one like
"Ugh,
2 weeks after my heart attack. I'm not gonna lie. I bought a
high
piano.
five."
Yeah.
And I was just like, this is it. This is it. Like I'm gonna jump back into it. And it was like it was that's all I did for a couple weeks. I just play I'm like trying to make this whole one Richard Marx song happen because it was the only
Hmm.
one where both hands didn't have to play at the same time. But yeah, and I remember the last time I took lessons, I had a huge music was a big thing for me, but piano, I was never able to get past the like reading and the music. It like bothered me so much, and I would play by ear and my teacher would get so pissed off, and then I ended up quitting because I was like, well, if you're
Hmm.
not going to play it for me, I'll just figure it out myself. Why am I coming here? And then ended up like trailing off, but there was something so beautiful, and I powered through that one song. It took weeks, and then I was like, oh, this is the best feeling. But it's also overwhelming. Like I'm not 7 anymore. The muscle memory took so much longer to come back, and it was a great feeling, but it's hard to find time like that. It's hard to get your head in that headspace.
It's also just a very bittersweet space for me.
Yes.
Whenever I go to see like live performances, I cry and I feel such a sense of longing and envy over like, I just want to be those people on that stage because that was the only thing that kept me sane during the hardest years of my
Yeah.
youth and dealing with, domestic violence and things like that. Like music was my safe space and now I'm afraid of it. And it's just so sad. And like, I still find myself, there's certain songs, certain chord progressions that just make my whole body shiver. So it's like, I'm aware that that is where my joy could live.
Yeah.
But God, what if you step out there and you suck?
Yeah.
What if you go out there and do it and it doesn't feel the same?
Oh,
And then where does the hope lie?
totally get that.
Many layers of fear
Yeah.
and longing mixed in there. Like I even wanted to go to Berklee College of Music when I was like in high school. Like it was that's who I was going to be. And when the world told me that's not who you're going to be, it was devastating to my psyche. It really was.
It takes something that was nothing but positivity and like puts this spin on it.
Yeah.
Oh,
And I also had never been given lessons or things like that. And I think I'm like the same age as Christina Aguilera and Britney Spears. Like if that's who you're competing against to get into those music colleges, it was never going to happen. I was never that kind of singer. I was like singing like pseudo opera, like Phantom of the Opera and stuff like that. I was never going to be a pop star, but it was there. So I know that's a hurdle I need to climb, but part of the work that I've been doing also with the unmasking and the values inventory is also just writing my memoirs because I feel like the training that we did with you, like I've tried at many points of my life to write my memoirs. So I have like a dozen drafts at various points of my life, tons of journal entries that are absolutely embarrassing and horrifying to read because I hate who I was in my 20s. But I have all this raw material from many points in my life, a lot of things that I documented, maybe like even in elementary school. And so I've been compiling all of those different pieces, transposing written journals into the computer to like write my memoirs. And I'm over 200 pages now
wow.
in Word. Yeah. And I started writing it after the retreat.
Oh my gosh.
So in just like 2.5
Yeah, a
months,
few
I've written
months.
over 200 pages of my memoir. And I think I'm just barely up to like when I was 28, 29.
Love this. So what are you going to do with it?
For a select few, I might give the actual book itself to because I am not anonymizing anything in that version. And I'm also like talking about real things
Yeah.
in a very raw, real way. And so I'm definitely sharing that with my husband and maybe, a couple people from the retreat who seem really, really interested. But for the rest of the world, I've been told on repeat that there's value in my story. So I really want to find a way to shape it into something that I can put out in the world, but that also doesn't put me at like risk. So my current plan is turning my memoir into spoken essays and also shorts to where I like maybe animate like a moment in time, like the cigarette story I told you
Yes.
earlier. That's
Yes.
going to be one of them. I have one about the lettuce wars, which I'm sure you'd love to hear about,
My God.
where there's specific moments in life where I actually set the scene and visualize it as well as give the narration. So it's like a memoir driven animated series, like where I revisit those memories, the mass misinterpretations and like survival strategies that shaped my life, kind of trying to weave in the past and present to really have like an intimate exploration of like shame and identity and like becoming a real person. What I'm trying to do is this is not going to be a YouTube channel where it's like top 10 signs you're autistic. There's plenty of that
Plenty of
content.
those happening.
I feel like what's missing is actual like lived experiences where people can be seen in that. So that's really what I'm trying to shoot for.
Amazing. And where can people find you if they want to keep tabs on what you're doing?
On YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok, I've taken the username Moon Unmasked.
I can't wait to see this.
And it's going to be, I'm doing this podcast with you, but I'm afraid to put my real face out there. So I'm using AI. I'm so sorry, but I have to because I can't draw. My sister is the artist in the family, but I'm using AI to create these animations, and I've created like an avatar of this, girl, this Latina girl with crazy blue, green, purple hair. And I'm using her, various different ages, with the blue hair, really trying to like lean into the moon motif because that was the name my mom originally wanted to name me. My sister has a sunnier name, and I was the moon child, which is kind of really poetic when you think about autistic people are like the moon metaphor, I think really, really fits. So the character's name is Moonbeam, to kind of give homage to the person my mom saw when she looked into my eyes for the first time.
I love that so much. Oh my gosh. I am obsessed with memoir, by the way, in case anyone I really am. I feel like that, and everybody I talk to about writing books is like, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. It's so hard to publish a memoir. And I'm like, I don't know, maybe that's like my autistic kind of like seeking psychology stuff, like we psychology books. I've always read self-help and all kinds of things like that. But I find memoir is one of the most just impactful ways to, I don't know. I just loved getting another person's story that way. And I think what you're talking about is so unique.
Yeah, I self-published a book in 2009 about green living, and that went nowhere, and I made negative monies. So like I don't really have a desire to like try to get a book out there because I think it is a hard medium,
It is.
especially when you're talking about memoir. But I think there's so much needed in that space, which is why I'm trying to shape into something that I can just put out there for free
But
for the world to enjoy
I think that's the best
without an
important
editor
part.
in the way.
Yes. No, and absolutely. And honestly, I was just talking to somebody else about this earlier today that, when people talk about like experts in the field, I'm like, I don't care what the experts in the field are saying. Like where we're
Mhm,
learning is from one another. Like we're learning
mhm,
from one another on social media. We're learning from one another in groups on Discord.
mhm.
We're learning about from one another everywhere you can find other people.
Yeah.
So what has that process been like for you? Are you finding that this is cathartic in some way to be taking all of this and making something out of it?
There is catharsis, and also there's a little part of me that wants to just slap the shit out of younger me. 'Cause it's just like, oh my God, don't do that stupid thing I know you're about to do. But also, I think just the act of compiling all this information, patterns that I thought were there are just so blatantly obvious now. And so I think the exercise of putting the memoir together, even if I had no plans of sharing it with other people, I think has taught me a lot that the personhood that I thought was stolen from me is actually hiding there between those old journal entries. And so I'm able to see those patterns, pick out that okay, that's authentically me. I'm going to put that right here and hold on to that. And I think without that reflection, I don't think I would have been able to see that. And so I'm starting to pick out pieces that once upon a time I resented, and no, that was someone attempting to adjust to a world that just didn't fit. And so I'm seeing that that's survival, that's smart, that's adapting,
Yeah.
that's not failure. It's part of that whole reframing that everyone needs to do when they're unmasking, is no longer seeing it as brokenness or failure, but seeing it as adaptation to the environment.
Did you feel anything at the retreat kind of like unlocked that for you, being around other people that were similar? I know there was a lot of talk on
Mhm.
the sides about things like that.
I think it reiterated a couple of the thoughts that I had when I did the training with you, hearing some of those same things said back, but it was also said back by a person physically standing in front of me. So there's quite a bit more weight in it when it's another neurodivergent person looking you in the eye for a brief moment going, I want to know more. I
Please
need
tell
to
me.
know more.
Yep.
And that's something the non-neurodivergent people, like, I don't want to disparage, but aside from my husband, no one's ever really wanted to know me to that level, to really understand, to be seen. So it was just, it kind of reinforced the idea that autistic people need community, not isolation. And so I'm hoping to kind of like try to participate in that community by putting my content out there.
I am so excited. I know what I will be going to right after we finish here. This is the best. I'm
My
so
channel doesn't have anything in
I
it
don't
just
care.
now. I'm
I'll
still
be
like,
patient.
I keep rewriting and redoing all the animations as I'm like, no, it's not right. The animation style is not right. Oh, the script is crap, so I'm like I got to stop the perfectionism and just get it out there.
I'm like so excited to see where that goes. And also I'm excited to see all of the fun things that you've been doing for yourself.
Yeah.
I loved it. I love the music
Mhm,
piece. I feel like that
mhm.
story is not over for you quite yet.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I'm trying to stop myself from buying a drum set because it also feels like it could be a cathartic thing to do. Just being on some drums.
The election year started with a piano and now we've evolved to drums. That feels right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that feels
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
right to me.
Yeah. Who needs a punching bag? Just get a drum set.
Seriously. Seriously, my son got a like punching thing on the wall for Christmas and
Oh
I
my
was like,
God, I
it's not
saw that.
enough.
I wanted it so bad when
Nope,
I saw that.
it is not enough. Like we're gonna have
Yeah.
some broken knuckles. We're gonna have some broken
Yeah.
knuckles. So well, Stephanie, I
Absolutely.
so appreciate you being here with us. So if anybody wants to
Yeah.
find you online, it's youtube.com and it's at Moon Unmasked. I super appreciate you sharing your story. And whether you
Mhm.
think you are or not, I just so appreciate how willing you are to share your story and your vulnerability.
Thank you.
You're the
It's a
best.
pleasure. I
Thank
get
you.
stuff out of this too.
Woo! Thanks so much for listening. If this episode resonated with you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. If you'd like to learn more about high masking, late diagnosed autism, check out our Instagram at NeuroCorious. And if you're interested in getting all the details of our unmasking retreats, please check out my website, CoreyAndreas.com. You can also find more content on our YouTube channel at That's Me Pod. And if you haven't already, please subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts so you don't miss an episode. We can't wait to see you next time.